everybody. This is Ben hopping on here today to talk a little bit about masculine feminine polarity and how to build polarity and work with polarity to achieve deeper orgasmic states, deeper states of inner union, deeper states of partner union, and just unlocking, basically evolved states of consciousness through polarity building in sexuality. So in Taoism, the yin and yang are the common representations of polarity, of masculine and feminine. And, I want to start just by saying these things apply. They have nothing to do with male or female. I mean, they do in some ways, but they're not exclusive to the genders. And even when I talk about masculine, feminine polarity, these are all just archetypes of energy, of hot and cold, of the mind and the body, of thinking and being and thinking. There's all sorts of many representations of this, and you can dive deeper into exploring this through plenty of other videos in basically duality and non-duality and some of these practices essentially of magic. That's what I'd say. It's like, because when we can combine opposites, when we can bring yin and yang, when we can bring two opposites together, that's when we can create magic. So one of my favorite metaphors in the sexual space of this, and what's often used, is the metaphor of fire and water being combined to make steam. And essentially, let's say I'm going to use, for the sake of teaching and the traditional teachings, that the feminine, that the yin is the water element, and that the masculine, the yang, is the fire element. Now, most of us who are raised in, 21st century, developed countries are very yang heavy. We're very overloaded with yang energy. We're very yin deficient. This is characterized by lots of doing, lots of thinking, lots of being in the head, lots of outward energy, and not a lot of being, not a lot of inward space and calm and being in the body, being in the mindlessness. So for most of us, without realizing it, we have a conditioning that's very yang dominant. So when we show up in the sexual space, often that can be the main characteristic of our experience, is lots of yang, lots of outward energy. And this is what's expressed in pornography, of course, right? Like a hard dick that's penetrating, and it's rock solid, and it's never anything but rock solid. And that's the performance, that's the metric of doing sex right. It's like this very yang approach. When in reality, there's an entire spectrum of sexuality. There are orgasmic states that can transcend anything you could ever imagine with a completely soft dick. And I have a whole nother video on this, a whole nother podcast on this, talking about erectile dysfunction and reinterpreting what that means, because a lot of us have been conditioned into this belief system of what sex looks like that actually keeps us really trapped from having multiple orgasms, for instance, as men, having non-ejaculatory orgasms, going into transcendent states of alchemy, of making this fire and water into steam. We're just all fire, and that can burn us out, honestly. It's great in some instance. I love fire. Fire has its purpose, but also water has its purpose. And so what we're going to be talking about a little bit today is, how to bring more water into the space. A lot of, the point of this whole work is, again, to come back to making steam. Traditionally, yes, men have been very fiery. We're very outward. That's why we have penises that stick out. We have our yang pole that is our sexual organ, is our penis, is our what's called the lingam, traditionally in Tantra and in Taoism. So men have their positive pole down below, and that's what's called also the lower heart, the penis. And their negative pole is their upper heart, which is the heart itself. So this is why a lot of men, they fall in love with their, initially by attraction, by having sex with somebody, and then over time, the love grows in their heart. Whereas with women, it's the opposite. They have a negative pole. They have an inward draw in their yoni or their vagina, and their positive pole is their heart area, which is why the breasts protrude as a pole. They're external. They're leading with the breasts. And the woman's heart penetrates the man's heart. That's the upper heart. And the man's lower heart and the man's dick penetrates the yoni or the vagina, which is the woman's lower heart. So this is a kind of a bit of an explanation of some of the dynamics within our bodies, the masculine and feminine bodies, of what's going on. All that to say that even with those poles, being the natural born state, most of us are all, including women, are all very yang heavy, as I mentioned, very yang, overly yang. And so in the sexual space, what can often happen is that there's this just fire energy, which is what actually leads to a lot of ejaculatory orgasms and a lot of, very short stinted, like fire's hot and it burns hot and it burns out really quick. So if we're looking to have, multi-hour, deep, transcendent, long-lasting orgasms and simmering just in this sexual energy that just, sends us into these other planes, we have to learn to bring in more water. And so the way we do this is actually nervous system regulation. This is a lot of the work we do in our training. So as men, developing the subtle neural pathways, the subtle reprogramming of our autonomic nervous system response to pleasure, to fire, which is contraction, which is like just, concentrating and building the fire. What we learn through a lot of these practices is how to release the energy and drop into the water. How to drop into the parasympathetic nervous system response rather than the sympathetic nervous system response. So the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system response is what happens during an ejaculatory orgasm. The whole body's tensing up like I talked about, and it's building, and the tensing, the fight or flight, is bringing that state that then ejaculates the energy and it's over. So what we have to do in the face of high amounts of sensation is breathe and release the energy and let the energy move up these subtle pathways, which in the beginning, there's some work, visualizations and guided practices and breath and sound and all these ancient technologies to move these energies up the spine, throughout the body, to disperse it. And that is what is dropping us into the water. And in these moments when we're right on our edge of ejaculation and we can drop into the water, poof, it just disperses the energy. And it allows us to go deeper. So we can be doing this work as men, and this is a lot of the training, is learning how to soften on our edges, learning how to release the control of sexual energy and trying to grasp it and just allow it to spread on its, as it has a life of its own throughout our body. This is our work, but it's worth mentioning that the partner we're with is the other. It takes two to tango, right? And if our partner is bringing a lot of this same yang energy, is like really outward and seeking orgasm, and in that sympathetic nervous system response, which also can come from a place of grasping, especially with a lot of women who've been with a lot of men who are two pump chumps, who ejaculate really early on in the sexual encounter. Many women will be deprived of any pleasure if they don't go in there and just, in their masculine way, get there what they came for. So there's almost like this competition for like who can get to an orgasm first, that has developed as a result of us all being very yin deficient and very yang, like outward seeking, doing this very porn based approach to sex. So if you're a man who's trying to practice entering non-ejaculatory states, semen retention or semen intention, as I like to call it, and doing all this deep inner work of opening these subtle channels of deeper orgasm, and you're with a partner who is super focused on fire and the masculine yang approach to sex, like trying to extract orgasm from the interaction, that's gonna pull you into her process, pull you into the fire, basically. It's gonna counteract all the work that you're doing. So it's worth noting this. If you're with a partner who is really obsessed with trying to get to orgasm as quickly as possible, like that's going to pull you very often into an ejaculatory orgasm. There's a lot of guys I work with who, they struggle so much with premature ejaculation. And yes, there is a whole lot of work we can do as men, 50% of the work, in fact. But even if you're doing all that work and you have a partner who's constantly in her fire and doesn't know how to go into her water, into her release of control, into her softening, going into the parasympathetic and not chasing orgasm, but letting orgasm emerge from within, just like we're doing, it's going to be counterproductive. It's going to add additional challenges to you reaching multiple internal orgasmic states. And her too, actually. So it's worth mentioning that. I like to let guys know that premature ejaculation may have actually just as much to do with you as it has to do with your partner. And actually, if you could be with a woman who's deeply tapped into a lot of these states, whether through training or even just, some women just naturally have this ability to really soften in orgasm and soften in these moments when the energy is really building. Like if you encountered that, you may not have any issues actually with premature ejaculation, especially with just some basic, practices like we go into in our training. And that being said too, there's the next level where if you're a man who can go fully into his water, it doesn't matter if you're with a female partner who's super fiery, who's super just trying to like pull you, knock you off the horse of your semen intention, your semen retention game, and trying to, extract orgasm and seek. Like if you get to a certain level, you can also drop into that state of just of like completely losing the fire. One of my teachers talks about, fire and water are these two elements that you can imagine. The fire naturally raises and the water naturally sinks. And what we're learning to do is inverse them and lead with the water on top, and the water sinks down and the fire moves up, and that's when they combine into steam. So when you can take this default state of, seeking, of fire, of outward sexual energy, of orgasm, and like dump a bunch of water, or like flip the pot and put the water on top, which is what we're doing in these practices, then you can ride anything. It's like bull riding. You could ride, the most young partner who's just going into these super ecstatic states and, getting her mind fucked to God, and heart just like blasted open, and hang on for the ride, So that can also be really refining. I don't want to put it down or anything. But in the beginning, and especially for guys who are starting out, it can be really helpful to be with partners who can go deep into their yin. And again, I find for most of us, for myself, like if I had a preference, it's generally meeting women, at least in this stage of my life, who also are exploring the depths of the yin, because again, we have such an excess of fire. We have so much masculine energy in men and in women in all of our bodies. And for most of us, the true medicine is going deep, deep into the parasympathetic states and releasing control and releasing seeking, and even desire itself. Like at the core of Tantra, there are these points of releasing the desire of orgasm for orgasm, even while orgasm is occurring. And when we do that, it short circuits everything. And that's when we just get blasted open into new levels of sexual pleasure. So I hope this has been an enjoyable podcast for you if you're interested in masculine feminine polarity. If you're a man interested in deepening in this work and deepening your sexual mastery, check out our training programs, and I'll see you all soon. Send a big love.